The Panthers are 0-2 in desperate need of a victory.
And the Falcons are looking for some revenge from last year.
Let's do it. It's Locked On Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On NFL Crossover Thursday here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Falcons. I'm Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers. He is Aaron Freeman, the host of Locked On Falcons, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where Aaron and I individually talk about the Panthers and the Falcons every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday, and yeah, folks, every Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching our shows over on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. It's week 3 in the National Football League, and we have an NFC South showdown as the 0-2 Carolina Panthers are facing off against the 1-1 Atlanta Falcons off of a primetime victory in Minnesota and looking like a fierce pass rush. Aaron, how you doing, man? Long time no see.
Hey, Julian, you said a fierce pass rush and talking about the Atlanta Falcons? What is this? What, is the world ending? What are we doing here? It's a crazy sort of thing, but yeah, I'm doing great. Talking about a good Falcons defense for the first time in seemingly a long time.
Yeah, and they had JJ McCarthy under siege on Sunday night. Like, it's not like JJ was great in that game on Monday against the Bears. He did just enough at the end. I give him a lot of credit for bouncing back, but the Falcons had him in hell. And he was a guy that now is banged up. We'll see how that works out for the Vikings, but I'm very intrigued in what Atlanta has. I know we talked about this in the offseason when I had you on, just trying to get a nice NFC South vibe check. And you had talked about maybe they have a pass rush when I got James Pierce Jr. and Jalen Walker, 2 guys who are from the Charlotte area. It's looking like this may have finally happened. But aside from the pass rush, what else would you look at as being maybe a top storyline heading into this week 3 matchup for the Atlanta Falcons?
Well, I think specifically to this game, the injury to cornerback AJ Terrell, he injured his hamstring about midway through that Vikings game, and that's going to impact this matchup, specifically going up against Tetairoa McMillan, who I think is going to, potentially be a stud for many, many years to come. So I'm not looking forward to his development over the.
He looks good.
Years. Yeah, he looked very impressive going and watching the first 2 games. No knocks against the Panthers, but that was probably the most him and Derek Brown, the typical sort of classic, like, hey, these 2 guys are really good. The rest of the team may need to step up in a lot of ways, but that sort of is the one specific thing for this game. But just sort of big picture stuff, do the Falcons come back down to earth after a very impressive win against Minnesota? It's a divisional matchup. We know these games typically are close. I know Carolina's probably licking their chops trying to get a first win of the season against a Falcon team that they, absolutely, I'm not going to say destroyed, but certainly destroyed the hopes and dreams of Falcon fans everywhere in that Week 18 matchup. And so, are they going to get deja vu? So that's kind of the big picture story. Can the Falcons keep this momentum that they gained after that Week 2 win over Minnesota?
Well, going back to Week 18, your friends, as in not your friends down in New Orleans, did not do you any favors. And that game was already wrapped up with Tampa winning the division before we even got to overtime back in Week 18. So I guess your fans can take solace in that. And how very Falcon of you to say, you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're just waiting for them to come back down to earth after you're finally looking like that they can rush the passer. There's some good vibes, but now AJ Terrell is banged up. And it's not just AJ Terrell. Is everybody in the NFL going to IR right now, Aaron? Got Joe Burrow. He's hurt again. JJ McCarthy, as I mentioned earlier, he's hurt. Jaden Daniels hurt. It's not just quarterbacks like Khalil Mack. Like, his whole arm got bent the wrong way, but apparently he's going to be back at some point in time this season. Like, injuries are starting to pile up, and that's really the story here in Carolina, as the starting offensive lineman, their right guard, Robert Hunt, and their center, Austin Corbett, are both going to IR. Hunt tore his biceps. They're saying that he may be back at some point this season. I have a hard time believing that's going to be the case. Austin Corbett, he's got a grade 3 MCL sprain. This is the 4th straight year he suffered a significant injury. He had a torn ACL in the last game of the season a couple of years ago, came back towards MCL, last year towards biceps, and now he's re-injured the same MCL, which now means that Cade Mays is going to start there at center like he did the final 8 games last year, and Chandler Zavala is going to step in at right guard. So that is what Carolina's really looking at with a banged-up offensive line. But fortunately, those guys, Mays and Zavala, both started at points times last year, and they brought back everybody on the O-line. So at least the hope is there won't be that big of a drop-off. I don't think there's going to be a drop-off at center. It actually may be improved. Right guard, yeah, I think it's going to be significant, losing Robert Hunt, now having Chandler Zavala there. So that's kind of the big storyline. Oh, yeah, the fact that the Panthers are 0-2 for the 4th straight season. Yeah, whether it's been Matt Rule, Frank Reich, now Dave Canales, they just can't get off to a good start to the season. And hell, they can't even get off to a strong start to games. So maybe that will change on Sunday against Atlanta.
Yeah, you say it's very Falcon of me to worry about them falling back down to earth, because basically every time you need a get right game, you play the Atlanta Falcons, you're going to have that get right game. And I'm hoping that this week we'll be able to put that narrative at least to bed for another week for the Falcons. But again, I've been trained, Julian, covering this team for a very, very long time, that, the minute you get too high on the Atlanta Falcons, they'll come and check you a little bit. So I'm optimistic about what they can do this week, but it's kind of wait and see mode for me.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because I think back to a year ago when the Carolina was also 0-2 after just hellacious starts by Bryce Young against the Saints and against Chargers, which led to him being benched in favor of Andy Dalton heading into that week 3 matchup on the road against the Raiders. I was talking to Q Myers, the host of Locked On Raiders, and he had basically the same sentiment of, yeah, Raiders, can't trust them. You need a get-right game. They're your get-right game. And all Andy Dalton did was throw for 300 bills and 3 touchdowns, becoming the first quarterback last season to do so. And the Panthers just slapped around the Raiders that afternoon. So maybe that will be the case for Carolina. Certainly they need it to be, because if they fall down to 0-3, yeah, this fan base is already pretty fed up, and I don't think it's going to be a good scene the rest of the year. And I just shudder to think what it's going to look like when Buffalo, by the way, all these Buffalo Bills fans, maybe they live Atlanta too, but they are all over here in Charlotte, and that's already threatening to be a Bills home game, as is. The Panthers get off to an 0-3 start, and even worse. I don't even want to think about what that scene's going to look like at Bank of America Stadium. So important for Carolina to finally get their season heading in the right direction on Sunday at Bank of America Stadium to prevent what the scenes could be later on this year. So we'll see if the Falcons indeed are their get-right game. But there's some key matchups that Carolina's going to have to win. There's some key matchups, of course, that Atlanta is going to have to win, may not even have to win. If Carolina decides to spot them 10 points like they did to Jacksonville and against the Cardinals the last 2 weeks. But we'll talk about those matchups here in just a moment on this Locked On Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Falcons. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, back here on this Locked On NFL Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Falcons. The 0-2 Carolina Panthers welcome their NFC South rivals from down I-85 South, in the Atlanta Falcons, 1-1 on the season, to Bank of America Stadium on Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And Aaron, let's take a look at some of the matchups that could change this game. Carolina certainly needs to get off to a good start and needs to win some of these matchups. What are some of the things you're looking from the Falcons' perspective that they're going to need to key in on Sunday to come out victorious?
Well, mentioned him at the top. Talk about Derek Brown. He's been a thorn in the side of this Falcons offensive line for many, many years. And we saw this Falcons offensive line struggle mightily against Vita Vea in week 1. It's a big factor in why they couldn't run the football. And as good as Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen are, they are not the world's most stoutest run defenders. They're they make their money, rushing the quarterback, and the Falcons were able to take advantage of that last week to the tune of 218 yards rushing combined between Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. And Derek Brown's, going to probably be a force to prevent you from getting to that number. And a big reason why that Panthers run defense was so atrocious last year, because they didn't have a force like him in the middle. And so to me, I want to see if this Falcons interior offensive line is benefiting from, facing a quote unquote lesser matchup last week. Can they deal with a big body like Derek Brown, who looks like he's, rounding back into sort of old peak form for him? And if they can, then they can get this ground game going and be the balanced offense that we know that the Falcons want to be. But if they can, and he goes out there and does many of the same things that Vita Vea did in week 1, that's going to be a huge challenge for the Falcons offensive line.
Yeah, on Fridays here on the show, I do Keys to Victory, and every single Friday feels like for the last 7 games or 8 games now, I've said the Panthers have to stop the run, because up until last Sunday against Arizona, they had given up 7 straight games of allowing their opponents 200 yards on the ground, including back in week 18 in January against these Atlanta Falcons. And yeah, Derek Brown is going to be a big piece to them stopping that. It finally came to an end on Sunday when they only allowed 82 yards against Arizona. James Conner didn't really get going. The only kind of big run plays they had were scrambles by Kyler Murray. So they did a good job. But I do think Atlanta, though, with Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, they're a little bit more equipped to run all over Carolina. Now, I like what they have in Arizona backfield-wise, but yeah, James Conner, he ain't Bijan. And Trey Benson is not Tyler just yet. So we'll see how that plays out, because that will be certainly a matchup Carolina really needs to win, and Derek Brown's a big piece of that. One thing I'm looking at kind of goes with the other side of the ball for Carolina in this matchup, and also in the interior of the offensive line. Mentioned Chandler Zavala and Cade May starting at center and right guard respectively in this game. They're going to need to hold up, and I'm very curious how they hold up against this Falcons pass rush, which appears through 2 games to be improved. And I look at the injury report from Wednesday. I'm seeing James Pierce Jr. did not practice with the groin. So curious if he's going to be able to play in his hometown on Sunday, or if that's going to be something more serious. I'm sure we'll have more information on that on Thursday. And then, of course, on Friday with game designations. But if he does not play, that will make things easy for Carolina, as he, along with Ruka got that one right. Shout out to him going to Clemson and having known to say his name for a while. Those guys are both top 20 in pass rush win rate, according to ESPN, at their respective positions. Ororo there in the interior, Pierce Jr. on the outside. So in Atlanta as well, looking at True Media, I mean, they're 3rd in the NFL in PFF pressure percentage at 46.3%. What I find interesting, though, is that their opponents have had the 2nd most time to throw the ball at 3.19 seconds. And Bryce Young is somebody who's been able to kill teams with his legs in scrambling. So I'm curious if he's able to make some of those out-of-structure plays that really attracted Carolina to him a couple of years ago when they took him number 1 overall at Alabama. So being able to hold up against his pass rush and get good, solid level play out of your interior in Mays and in Zavala is a big matchup from my perspective here in Carolina. Anything else sticking out to you on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, again, rehashing what we talked about a little bit earlier is like, who's going to cover the Tetairoa McMillan? AJ Terrell would be that guy. Doesn't sound like he's going to play this week. I'm not expecting him to play. We haven't got an official word on that, but Raheem Morris said he's week to week. And, I'm slowly becoming an expert in understanding Raheem Morris's coach speak. And this one is one that I feel like he's saying that AJ's not going to play without actually saying AJ's not going to play. And even if AJ played, it would still be a concern going up against T-Mac, given his size. That's the type of receiver that AJ historically struggles against. Now, he had a pretty solid game against Mike Evans in week 1, one of the better games he's had against Mike Evans. So maybe he's turning a corner in that regard. But if he's down in this game, that doesn't really add anything to the Falcons this particular Sunday. So it's one of those things where the other corners are a lot more questionable. The rookie Billy Bowman has been able to make some plays, but he's been susceptible to some deep stuff working in the slot. Mike Hughes is not the biggest corner in the world. D. Alford stepped in for AJ Terrell last week. He's not the biggest corner in the world and tends to be very grabby. They have your guy, CJ Henderson, potentially.
Oh, yes.
on
Old
the practice.
friend.
Yes, your favorite cornerback in the world, CJ Henderson. I know. I know you got the fan club going for CJ Henderson. He might be the salvation for the Falcons secondary. Clark Phillips, another undersized cornerback. So this is a very favorable matchup for Tetairoa McMillan in this game, given all the shrimps that he or potentially the Falcons going to throw at him. And he can just kind of make these one-handed moss catches that we've seen him make throughout these first couple of games of the season. And so them trying to keep a lid on him is going to be a challenge. And again, the key for that is probably not being able to lock him down in the secondary. It's just going to be, hey, we're going to get after the quarterback and throw a lot of stunts and twists and all the things that the Falcons pass rush, this newfound Falcons pass rush. Again, Julian, it's a crazy thing for me to say. I've never said these words before on a podcast before. This newfound Falcons pass rush that's actually good. Getting after Bryce Young, creating some of these turnovers, and that's going to really help out their secondary.
Yeah, I mean, secondary's best friend is a good pass rush. I mean, it doesn't matter how good your DBs are back there. I mean, you can have Deion Sanders, you can have any Hall of Famer, and if they don't have a pass rusher out there having to defend these guys for 4 or 5 seconds, they're eventually, going to give it up. Even Prime, shout out to him, of course, former Atlanta Falcons, great. But yeah, like I'm interested in this because that's a matchup I'm looking at as well. Would D. Alford be the man called up to be on McMillan, or do you think they'd kind of rotated around? Because at least on the depth chart, he's right behind. I know he filled in on Sunday night for Terrell when he went down.
It'll most likely be him or Clark Phillips. Clark Phillips has generally been their sort of backup outside corner, but he's been dealing with a rib injury since August, and I think that has led to them not necessarily having him active, I think, either the first 2 weeks of the season. So he may be ready to go this week. And he's the more proven option as an outside corner. But again, tiny human being versus giant human being is not a recipe for success for the Falcons.
Yeah, but Clark Phillips was a dog back at Utah. I don't love hearing tiny. I mean, it's not about the size of the dog; it's about the size of the fight in the dog. And Clark Phillips is the dog. Okay. Maybe it's not working out the way people were hoping it would in Atlanta, but I'm still a Clark Phillips believer. There's no one out.
He's solid backup. I don't know if he's a starting caliber corner, but he's a solid backup.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. And I would say this because, Tetairoa McMillan has been really good for Carolina so far. He's 8th in the NFL in receiving yards. He has been the one so far constant out there. Hunter Renfrow actually really had a nice game on Sunday. Had 2 touchdown receptions. Talked to him in the locker room earlier on Wednesday just about kind of his journey and where he's at. Like, he hasn't really taken a lot of time to kind of look back at missing last year, which was his decision, then being cut by Carolina, now being back. But he's going to have a lot of family in the building, and he said maybe he'll hit him then when he gets out there on Sunday at Bank of America Stadium, being back home in the Carolinas, wearing that Panthers uniform in front of the home crowd. But he's been a guy who's really been nice for them, and he's been able to bounce back physically. Last week was on the injury report of a rib injury. So far, at least through Wednesday, that has not been the case. So good to hear, because Dave Canales was concerned about where he was at physically, and has also been a champion in his comeback. But the guy I'm really focused on now, after listening to you talk about some of the concerns you have about the secondary in Atlanta, is Xavier Legette, who quite honestly has probably been the worst wide receiver in the National Football League, at least starting wide receiver in the National Football League over the first 2 weeks of the season, because he's last in success rate among guys who have at least 10 targets. He is bottom in EPA per target. It has not been a good season for him so far. But Dave Canales talked about on Wednesday, he's just got to fight through it, that he believes in him, and it's about opportunities and getting him there. And if there's going to be an opportunity and a chance to get there after 2 tough weeks, it sounds like it's going to be on Sunday against these Falcons, who are missing a couple of key pieces, mainly AJ Terrell. So that's one I'm also looking at, and we'll see if he's able to get going for the first time this season. So those are some key matchups ahead of this Panthers-Falcons game on Sunday. But what does each team need to do to win? And maybe we'll be bold enough to give you all some predictions for this game on Sunday. We'll do that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Falcons. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. One of my favorite flavors is the transfusion flavor. A little bit of lime, a little bit of grape, like one of my favorite drinks of alcohol, but no alcohol, and a bunch of caffeine caffeine. Honestly, I love how fast it kicks in and that it's sugar-free. So I don't worry about crashing later on. Enough with boring flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get the favorites you love to be bold and try something new in-store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I and Aaron and all of us make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and the fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing Prize Picks lately, a lot actually lately, and it's such a fun way to stay locked in for the season. It's quick, easy, and honestly, my favorite way to follow along with football. This week's max discounts include Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, the Chiefs are 0-2. Can you imagine that? All you need is a half a passing yard. I think he's going to get that on Sunday Night Football in the Meadowlands against the New York Giants, and then you win. So great start for you on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in the lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in the lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Right back here, crossover Thursday, Locked On Panthers, Locked On Falcons, and it's me, Julian Council, with Aaron Freeman, breaking down this 1 o'clock matchup on Sunday between the 0-2 Panthers and the 1-1 Atlanta Falcons with a newfound pass rush. Is it real, or is it just the same old Falcons? Aaron and plenty of the Falcons fans out there hoping that they'll rise up to the expectations that you're hard to ever believe in. So we'll see if that happens on Sunday. But looking at this game, what do the Falcons in particular, Aaron, need to do to beat the Panthers and put them in an 0-3 hole where the fan base will be, well, despondent and quite mad if that happens?
Yeah. You know, I hope the Falcons can do to the Carolina Panthers what they did to the JJ McCarthy hype last week and just kind of ruin all the hopes and dreams of Panthers fans everywhere. You know, I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Get off to a fast start. It's been a key to success for Jacksonville and Arizona. And if you can get an early lead against this Panthers team, that's going to give an opportunity for this pass rush to really pin their ears back and really test whether or not Chandler Zavala and Cade Mays are as good as the players that are replacing them. And you can force Carolina to be one-dimensional, which I think, you know, doesn't necessarily play to their strengths. And then the other sort of two keys that for me are, you know, can this Falcon team convert in the red zone? They struggled last week against Minnesota. That was probably the one blemish in that sort of complete performance for them. They went 1 for 5. They're 2 for 7 on the season. And they arguably, the one red zone conversion they had at the end of the game was Minnesota letting them score in order to get the ball back so that they can have attempt to come back down 2 scores. And currently the Falcons are 28th in red zone efficiency this year on offense. Carolina's 10th in red zone efficiency on defense. So Julian, I know it may be something you're incredulous to say, but this Carolina Panthers defense actually looks like a functional NFL defense this year, which is, you know, a big turnaround from last year. And so can the Falcons, you know, have their get right game in the red zone? I think, you know, this week against Carolina, we'll see. And then the third thing is just, you know, last week after a rough week 1 for special teams, they had a really strong week 2 on special teams with their new kicker, John Parker Romo, making 5 field goals, and just keep that momentum going. Let's not regress back to special teams being a problem like it was in that first game, because in these divisional matchups, these games typically are close, and it's probably going to be a couple of field goals that could wind up deciding the outcome of this game. And so hopefully the Falcons do not fall back down to earth in that regard.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the Panthers defense is quite there yet, because against Jacksonville, again, they gave up 200 yards on the dot, and I think it was like 6.2 yards per carry. It wasn't a great day for them. Last week was a better day. I mean, the touchdown that was scored at the beginning of the game was not on the defense, because that was a defensive touchdown by Arizona. And then I did feel like they did a good job by holding the Cardinals to a field goal after there was a DPI call on Mike Jackson that put the ball right there inside the 5. Now, Arizona had scored a touchdown. Trey McBride decided to hold a player in Nick Scott who was inconsequential to that play, and that got called back. But they still held him to a field goal, and it was a 13-3 game. before Dave Canales decided, actually, I don't want to score before the half. Let's punt the ball back to Arizona. And then it was 20-3, then 27-3. And then that's when the comeback happened. So I do think they actually played fairly well last week, considering what everyone's been used to here with the defense of Carolina. So this will be really the test, because I do think Atlanta's going to want to run the ball on them. And let's not pretend like back in January, the Falcons didn't pretty much do whatever they wanted to this defense. And I mean, vice versa. Bryce Young and Carolina did pretty much whatever they wanted to the Falcons defense. And that's how the games are going to go and be that exciting. Then so be it. Forget having a pass rush for Atlanta. Forget stopping the run for Carolina, because at least a shootout can be fun, because I don't think these teams get, especially the Panthers, don't get into too many of those. But looking at just the things that Carolina needs to do, yeah, it's kind of like what you said. The Falcons need to start fast, like the Jags and like the Cardinals. The Panthers can't allow that to happen. They have to get off to a good start. They cannot get in the hole, which brings me to the second one. Don't spot the Falcons 10 points. They don't need it. They're clearly a good enough team to where they can win potentially on their own. So why help them like you helped Jacksonville and like you helped Arizona last week, which literally was the difference in the game a week ago. Those two turnovers on the opening drive that resulted into 10 points. And then, I mean, I'm focused on Cade Mays and Chandler Zavala, but also the other offensive linemen, do your jobs as well, because there's going to be a lot of focus on those guys stepping in. But Damian Lewis, do your job at left guard right there next to Cade Mays, filling in at center. Ike Ekwonu came back last week after missing week 1 while recovering from an appendectomy. Do your job. Taylor Moton, he's doing it. I looked over at pass rush win rate, or as far as pass block win rate, rather, on ESPN. He's won every pass block rep so far this season. Now, the sack at the end of the game, Moton was on that guy, but I do think that was actually a communication issue with Chandler Zavala blowing that. So I would assume if ESPN saying he's won every pass block attempt because that was a sack that ended the game. I don't know, but he's been nails. He got that extension before the season. He's a leader in that locker room. He's been the constant there at right tackle. Like, those guys need to also just do their jobs. They're going to win this game and not fall to 0-3. The line over at FanDuel, our friends and presenting sponsors here on Locked On Podcast Network, for the NFL channel at least, they're plus 5.5. The Panthers are at home dogs against the Falcons. You got a prediction? You saving that for Friday, or what you think?
No, 5.5 for a divisional team at home is like, that feels like, hammer the Panthers in this one. If you're expecting a typical NFC South divisional matchup that will go down to the final 5 minutes of the game and probably a field goal that may decide it in that regard. But, I do feel optimistic that the Falcons will win this game, but I don't think it's going to be some sort of smooth sailing 38-10 type blowout that I think a lot of people may be thinking, given the confidence of how good this team looked in certain areas coming off of that Vikings game. So I think it'll be a typical divisional game. It'll be close, and as every Falcon game goes, like, you're going to be taking your heart medication in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, for me, I was just making sure that I had the right numbers. I got the math wrong a couple weeks ago. Panthers are 19-51 since I've been doing this show. So hard for me to go into any game with confidence that they're going to win, especially the way they've started the season by just not showing up until like the second half. And really, they didn't show up to the season until they were down 27-3 last week. And then it's okay. Maybe you got some positive momentum you can carry over. Bryce Young had, looking at EPA, one of his top 3 performances. Now, the turnovers obviously were the difference in the game, but that's a positive to see that. There's the Bryce you saw against Atlanta back in week 18 in January. Can you see more of that? I mean, I can see him covering. I can see them potentially winning. I can see them just coming out flat again. I can see everything under the sun. Aside from maybe just like completely blowing out the Falcons. I think that's the one I'm looking at, and I'm not really thinking that's in the cards. It could be. Now that I put out there in the universe, just me not believing that's going to happen. And if it does, I mean, fine by me. I'd rather that than them start off 0-3. And then a lot of y'all just be like, yep, do see ya. So we'll see. I'm hoping for a good game. I'll take a shootout. I'll be there on Sunday in the press box, and hopefully it'll be a beautiful Carolina blue sky in Uptown Charlotte for the Falcons and the Panthers. But he is Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons. I'm Julian Council of Locked On Panthers. Both of us will be back on Friday. I'll be doing Keys to Victory as I typically do. Aaron, what do you got on tap for all the Falcon fans out there on Friday?
Me and Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta get up to our usual shenanigans, talking more about keys to victories and all the nonsense we get into. So yeah, that's in store for you on Friday on Locked On Falcons.
Shenanigans and nonsense on Locked On Falcons. Again, y'all check us out on YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And we'll be back on Friday. I'll be back on Sunday. I'm sure Aaron will be back on Sunday, of course, breaking down this matchup. Be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding for the Panther fans and rise up for the Falcon fans. And we'll talk to y'all here on Thursday, or on Friday, rather, on Locked On Panthers and on Locked On Falcons.